Nittany Lion Roar with Extreme Panda here, and let's talk a little bit more about Telluria. So in part 1, I had talked about whether or not I thought Telluria should get a nerf, and I said I didn't think she needed a nerf, and I listed the reasons why. You can go back and watch that one. In part 2, which I just put out a few days ago, I had mentioned that some things had happened in the last week and a half, including an alliance disbanding because of how difficult wars were becoming with Telluria. And although I wasn't ready to commit to thinking she needed a nerf at that point, I wanted to raise the other side of the argument for why some people were thinking she did need a nerf. So here's part 3, and it doesn't matter what I think anymore because Small Giant Games has decided, in fact, to go ahead and nerf Telluria. But what is kind of big news is it's not just Telluria, but they're going to rebalance a number of heroes. This means that not only are some heroes going to get nerfed, multiple heroes probably will get nerfed, but you're probably going to see them go ahead and strengthen some heroes too. And this is why I always advocate for saving every 5-star hero you have, because you never know when they're going to go in and rebalance the heroes. Previously they have increased the strength of several heroes. If you read through this post on the community forum, you're going to see that their goal is to make sure that the balance of the game stays intact. And this means some heroes that are just never used right now, they would like for them to be viable, so they're going to boost them as well. So let's go back to Telluria and talk about her a little bit. First, let's kind of cover what's making her so strong that they think they need to nerf her in the first place. I think it's really just everything about her kind of all adds up. There's not one thing that makes her so overpowered. And it's kind of a problem because on their own, each of the things that makes her good are pretty fair. So it's hard to advocate for nerfing any individual thing about her. But it's her defense stat. Her defense stat is so high that it is really, really, really difficult to kill her, especially with tiles before she goes off. On top of this already ridiculously high defense stat, she's Paladin class, so she gets that extra 25% boost to her defense for 2 turns quite frequently. So she is just insanely hard to kill. On top of that, she's got this really high HP to go along with it. Now, please know that this Telluria I'm showing you has level 20 as far as class talents go. So there's a lot of emblems on this particular Telluria. So these stats are showing higher than the generic maxed card. So it's the defense stat and the HP that makes it so hard to kill her, but it's other things here too. Okay, so the minions going to everybody now just adds to the difficulty in trying to kill her in particular, but now the rest of the opposing team as well. The 411 heal over time is also another thing that's just making her hard to kill, but now the opposing team as well. So you've got the minions on top of the regeneration. You have the negative 34% mana generation for 3 turns, which I think is the one a lot of people will point to as one of the most difficult things about her. So I just mentioned several things that make her difficult to kill. The negative 34% mana generation really makes you unable to play the game. Once she goes off, you're kind of just trying to kill with tiles, and since it's so hard to kill her, you're not killing anyone with tiles. And then lastly, Elemental Link gives all nature allies plus 10% critical chance for 6 turns. That is something that probably goes unnoticed, but is a lot better than you would think, because now the whole opposing team is incredibly hard to kill, but they're also getting critical hits. So you don't notice that one probably as much in your gameplay, but it's why it seems like when Telluria goes off, you just die. So that is what is making her so strong. In fact, there are other things not printed on this card that's making her so strong too. Talked about this a little bit in part 2, and that are the flanks that people are tending to put behind her, namely Vela being probably the number 1 flank to put behind Telluria because of her anti-red special. It just makes that even more difficult to kill if Vela goes off and now your red heroes aren't doing anything. All right, well, let's think about what we can do to fix Telluria. If we put ourselves in the shoes of Small Giant Games, what would we change about this? I kind of want to point something out that is tricky for them. Telluria is a very fair, very, very fair offensive hero. In fact, I think she's a lot of fun to play with on offense, not overpowered, and really kind of cool. I am sad to hear about the nerf for offense because I really enjoy playing with her on offense, and I don't think she's overpowered there. And I think that when they nerf her, we're going to see her disappear from usefulness on offense, or at least that's what I fear. So I hope that what they'll do is think about a nerf that would only really affect her on defense and not on offense. That's going to be a challenge to do, so let's think critically about that. One of the nerfs that I think they could do that would really help on defense, but still allow her to be viable on offense. I don't know. Maybe it would help her to stick around on offense, maybe not. But you could, instead of doing a negative 34% mana generation for 3 turns for the enemies, you could just make that like negative 10% for everybody. So that way, like when she goes off, the defense doesn't just get to go like willy-nilly free and firing off their specials. You know what I mean? Like now when she goes off, she's very powerful still. However, you know, it does slow the game down, which is ultimately something that's going to fix a big problem with this game that's not just Telluria. It just happens to be that Telluria comes out at the time where Small Giant Games has put a lot of heroes in here that affect mana already, a lot of effects that speed up mana and slow down mana and things like that. When you're messing with the mana, that's really the dangerous thing in this game when you're putting out new heroes. So if Telluria goes off and slows everybody's mana down just a little bit, I think that would do something that would really help this game in that it would slow things down a little bit so it's not just 3 turns and over. Telluria would still be very powerful. It would still be really hard to kill her. And here's what it would fix. You would get to keep her average for 1 turn. Once she goes off now, she sort of makes herself slow then, because if everybody gets the negative 10%, now she's not going off like a strobe light every 3 matches. She's slowing down just like everybody else on defense. So I know it slows down the attacker too, but now it slows down the defense as well. I think that's a fair way to do that, because when you take her on offense, then you can, I think you can still play with her on offense that way. Although I'm not sure. I'd have to test that out a little bit, but that might be a way to try and fix her so that she's fair for both sides. Another thing you could potentially do that I think would allow her to still be useful on offense but weaken her a little on defense is just lower that defense stat. In fact, it's too high. You can't kill her with tiles. So I would lower that a bit and just make her a little easier to kill so that sometimes you have a fighting chance. But I think a lot of people have been advocating for changing her speed from average to slow as a potential nerf. And I kind of disagree with that one, just because if you do that, she will be unusable on offense. At this stage of the game, it's really, really hard to take a slow hero on offense and for it to be useful at all. I don't take any slow heroes into war on offense ever. And I have Kunshin, and he would be great to use, and he's just too slow. So I take Costume Regard instead of Kunshin. The only time I take Kunshin on offense in war is when I'm cleaning up, because I can ghost the tiles that way. But if they change Telluria from average to slow, the only way you could ever use her is as a tank, and then you don't get to play with her. You just play against her, and I don't like that. I don't really like just tank heroes, because you get so excited to get this hero with the special and wanting to have it, and when it's just a tank, like this is what I didn't like about Guinevere. I had Guinevere, but I would never use Guinevere on offense. So I never got to play with Guinevere. I only got to play against Guinevere. And I don't think that's fun. So I hope that they're really considering a nerf that would accommodate her use on offense while weakening her use on defense a little bit. I think they still want Telluria to be up there as one of the best heroes. I think if you were to change her speed from average to slow, she would still be an amazing tank, and in fact probably still the best tank, because it doesn't seem like slow heroes at the tank position actually fire any slower. Like, in fact, I'm not worried at all about her weakening if her speed goes from average to slow as a tank, but she would disappear from her usability on offense, and I don't really like that. Some other things that could potentially be done here are, this one might be fair as well. Instead of just doing a straight up all enemies get negative 34% mana generation for 3 turns, maybe it's something like what Lady of the Lake does. Maybe the minions, only your heroes that get hit by the minions, maybe they slow down for a turn or something like that. Negative 10%, or I don't know. At this point, I'm just kind of like brainstorming a little bit to think about things that they could potentially do. I'm curious about the things that you think they could potentially do. One last one that I was thinking or have heard people say could be done is just to change the class from Paladin to something else, like perhaps the same thing as Vela, which I'm forgetting the name of right now, but it's the same thing as Ranveer. Where's my Ranveer? This class, Druid. So Vela's a Druid, and if you make Telluria a Druid, for example, then you can't have Vela and Telluria on the same defense unless you're willing to go put one on without a lot of emblems right now. But I don't think they can do that. I think that would be impossible at this point to change a class talent, because look, so many people like me have emblems on Telluria already. What's going to happen to those emblems? Are they just going to disappear? All those wasted resources and time and things like that. So I don't think they're changing the class talent. I think this brings me to my final point, though, when we're talking about class talents, and we're talking about particular heroes. I think there's a bigger issue that scares me more in the game than a specific individual hero like Telluria. And it is the damage over time effect that comes from Vela. So here's what happens if you make Telluria a Druid, then you can't really use Vela as much. However, what happens then is people go get the current hero of the month, which has a very, very similar effect to Gravemaker and is a paladin, and they just put their emblems back onto Clarissa. And then you have Gravemaker and Clarissa as flanks, and you've got that damage over time going. What I'm afraid of in this game is there's starting to become too many damage over time effects that are too fast and too powerful. And it's part of what's making Telluria so strong. So she slows down the game a bit. And in and of itself, I don't think that would be too much of a problem, except for Gravemaker, Clarissa, and Vela all just burn down the enemies so fast. And now that they have effects that are stacking, you can't recover from it. So I actually think that's a bigger issue with the game than anything. And I hope that what they'll do is come out with a hero, and maybe this is something they could even do with, I don't know, Kunshin, or just because Kunshin needs a little bit of a boost to be usable again on offense, or just make a new hero. I heard somebody suggest a cleansing healer, but one that also prevents ailments. So kind of taking like Kunshin and Grizzle and putting them together into one. Because at some point here, there's so many heroes that give ailments. It's getting really hard to deal with them all stacking on top of each other. And that's part of the reason why a lot of the attacks, especially in war, where there's also like arrows and healing and attack boosts on top of it, just kind of like, sometimes you can feel helpless on offense. You just go in and you make like 3 matches and you're dead already. And you're like, what happened? So anyway, I wanted to point that out. It's something that Small Giant Games, I think, has to be really careful of, because in and of itself, it's not just Telluria. I do want to make one more bonus point. The reason I think she's so good on defense and very fair on offense is with the way that they beta test, which I think, and I'm going to be very careful what I say here, but so I'm going to give very limited information, but what I want to put out there is that right now, the way beta testing works, the heroes are very thoroughly vetted for offense, but they are not very thoroughly vetted for defense. The way the system is set up, you don't really get to test heroes at the full power and potential that they have on as a defensive hero. So it doesn't surprise me that one slipped through the cracks like this, because it didn't really get fully tested and vetted. There had to be a lot of imagining what it would be like. I want to come straight out and say I was not a beta tester whenever Telluria was being tested or anything like that. So this information is not coming from me individually, but just knowing how the beta testing works, and how I could see that being an issue. And so what I would just say is, for Small Giant Games, you probably need to think about your beta testing and think about how you're going to more successfully test defensive heroes so one doesn't slip through the cracks like this again. So anyway, that's everything that I have for you today. I'm interested to hear what you think. Which kind of nerfs would you do in order to preserve Telluria as an offensive hero, but weaken her as a defensive hero? So make sure to post in the comments what you think and what you'd like to see. I am really, really curious to see what you all think. If you haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.